Welcome to the Backyard Bouquet podcast, where stories bloom from local flower fields and home gardens. I'm your host, Jennifer Galizia of the Flowering Farmhouse. I'm a backyard gardener turned flower farmer located in Hood River, Oregon. Join us for heartfelt journeys shared by flower farmers and backyard gardeners. Each episode is like a vibrant garden, cultivating wisdom and joy through flowers. From growing your own backyard garden to supporting your local flower farmer, the Backyard Bouquet is your fertile ground for heartwarming tales and expert cut flower growing advice. All right, flower friends, grab your gardening gloves, garden snips, or your favorite vase because it's time to let your backyard bloom. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Helen Skiba from Artemis Farm. Helen and her team are redefining what it means to be young, innovative farmers by focusing intensely on the health of the soil and sharing their land collaboratively with other local farmers. Artemis Farm, located along the Colorado Front Range, is known for its unique and exquisite flower varieties and is deeply committed to organic farming practices. They seek out new ways to bring health to the soil through limited tillage, cover crops, and animal integration. As a dedicated grower and tender of soil, Helen brings a background in soil science and poetry to her fieldwork, as well as a passion for intricate color and texture in her designs. I'm so excited to dive into Helen's story and learn more about where she blooms. Helen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Jennifer.
Absolutely. It's such an honor to get to chat with you today. So let's just dive in. If you can start by telling us about your journey into flower farming, what inspired you to start Artemis Flower Farm?
Great question. I don't know that I was really inspired to start a farm so much as I fell into it, which is great. And it was really an interesting journey. So I came back from Peace Corps in Ecuador. So I was a agriculture volunteer there. I worked with growers there who were farming all kinds of things for subsistence, like yucca and corn and other staple crops. And then they were cash farming cacao and also coffee. So I learned a lot there just about being in the land and growing. And then when I got back, I really wanted to work in sex education, but I just couldn't get a job like with Planned Parenthood or any other kind of organization. So I went and visited a friend of mine who was farming in a town nearby and just like really loved what he was doing. And the land felt really peaceful and gentle and I felt like a place where I wanted to be. So I said, "Hey, I'm going to be your intern next year, just FYI." And and then, from there just sort of grew into a business. So the person who had been doing flowers there before me left and they said, "Hey, would you like to take on, we've got 10 weddings or something booked for the next season. Would you like to take on this job?" I said, "Yeah, sure. How hard can it be?" And then it was, just this very the just sort of the cover came off and you could see this deep well of learning that was available in flowers and just this long career kind of opened up before me. So it was really exciting. So I started there. It was a wedding venue, and so had a really captive audience, a captive customer base, and so worked there for 5 years, grew the business, became the owner of the business, and then I left there and I started working. I worked 2 seasons at a farm nearby that was a big vegetable farm, but I was their flower manager. So, that was really great experience. Lots of tractor work and irrigation and big CSA and going to farmers market. And then when I was finished there, I was able to find this really awesome situation that we're in now, where I am farming on leased land, but it has, a huge greenhouse. It has underground irrigation system and a pond and a pump. It's beautiful, and we have a lot of space and infrastructure that's really supporting us, and I'm doing that with another grower couple, Cody and Melissa, Speedwell Farm and Gardens, and they're vegetable growers, and they're just incredible. We also have a vermicomposting person who does that on site, and then we house the tool library, which is a business run by another farmer that rents and leases equipment to farmers at less than commercial rates, which is really a huge service. So it's dynamic. We have a lot going on, and but it really was a winding path getting here. But what I found throughout the whole thing was that I continue to just really be inspired by the huge diversity of flowers, the amount there is to learn about cultivating them, about selling them, about cutting them, about designing with them. I mean, it's just this world that continues to inspire me. And I just feel really lucky to have found that in my life.
That sounds like an amazing journey that you have been on.
Yeah.
Can I ask how many years ago did that first internship start?
Yeah, so that was 2014 was my first season. So this is, I guess that makes this my 11th season, 2025, which is, yeah,
That's
it's a good long
awesome.
run.
Over a decade, which I
Yeah,
know a lot of our listeners are newer into their careers as flower farmers or cut flower growers. So there's so much wisdom that I know we can gain from you today. And my mind is just swirling with questions because I
tell me
love
about it.
your background. So you started in Ecuador, which
Yeah.
had to be quite an eye opening experience. Did you go there to learn about the soil health? Because I know from reading a little bit about your bio online and knowing who you are through the ACS, now I'm going to butcher it. It's the
It's
acronym
okay.
always gets me, the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers. I know a little bit about you, and I know that soil health is super important for you.
Yeah. Well, Ecuador was really just the Peace Corps experience, which is really diverse and varied and doesn't always have a focus. But I did, while I was there, I was actually working on my master's degree as well. So I combined my Peace Corps service with my master's from CSU, and that was in soil and crop sciences. So I wasn't really working on soil health, but I was working on a biological fertilizer. So we used fermented cow manure to make a solution that was sprayed on the cacao trees. It was a crazy experience because the plot that I chose to do my research on was out in the middle of the river on an island. So I had to cross the river with this backpack sprayer on, full of this basically poop. And then I was out in the middle of these cacao fields and being chased by wasps. I can't tell you how many stings I got while I
Oh
was
my
spraying
gosh.
these cacao trees. It was crazy. It was a crazy research project that I chose to design in the way that I did. But, but yeah, it was that. So that part definitely, you know, that research was more on plant health really than soil health. But after that, it just when I was working in Lyons, I was working on this soil that was really pretty sandy, and which was actually great. It was easy to grow in, easy to irrigate, all of that. But what I started to notice was that if I was able to do some cover cropping, if I was able to do a little tarping, um, in our climate it was much better than just spreading compost on the rows, which is also important, but having the living roots in the ground and also um, having, you know, the tarp over top really helps speed up decomposition because our climate is so dry. And so without, you know, unless you're like watering all the time, you just don't get the same decomposition and the same soil improvement that you would in a place that's a little bit wetter where you could put down compost, have it decompose, and have it start integrating into the soil in a much faster way. Like it's still possible to do no-till and regenerative farming here, but it just the results take so much longer because of the pace of decomposition here, and that's just due to the moisture levels. So
Interesting.
yeah. But so I would say that my soil health interest really started at that first farm where I was working. And then after that, when I was at the large farm, they were doing intensive tillage. They were doing, passes with a moldboard plow and then with a disc and then with a tiller or maybe a harrow and then a tiller, So it was like multiple passes with the tractor disturbing the soil. And they grew good crops. They did a lot of compost. They put a lot of compost down. But you could tell that the soil it was getting tired. And they did some cover cropping, but, not not in a sort of a regimented way, I guess I would say, not a planful way. And so you could see kind of the effects that tillage was having on the soil. And then, so when I was able to get this property, I came in with the intention of not doing a lot of tillage. When we first got here, we did one pass with a power harrow, and then we built our beds with a rotary plow on our BCS. And yeah, and then since then, we've really just been doing a little bit of tillage with our BCS, and we do a lot of broad forking, we do a lot of cover cropping, and we do a lot of tarping and compost and mulching with leaves. I mean, you name it. We do what we really try to integrate all of the strategies. So, but it has been challenging. Our soil is clay. It's quite dense, and so getting enough tilth to plant transplants or especially seeds, it can be almost impossible. And especially like later in the season. So we'll have, let's say, a moist spring, and then it will start to dry out. And even though we're irrigating with drip and everything, we're not irrigating with overhead, which means that the soil doesn't get, you know, moist all the time. And so if we don't have rain for a long period or we have very little rain, the soil gets really tight, and can be quite difficult. So we do use tillage, here and there as a way to just get more crops in the ground. Because at this point, for me, what I see is that having roots in the ground is more important than like having healthy, good roots in the ground is more important than like strictly saying we're going to do no tillage whatsoever. So getting making sure the bacteria and the other biology is really happy with the carbon it's receiving from the roots, and then the roots themselves doing physical work in the soil, like that's really important. So we try to keep things planted as much as possible, and that's where we're at right now with the soil health stuff.
I love that. That is such a great way to farm and something that I am personally trying to do at my new farm. But I'm
Yeah.
curious, you went from a very traditional heavy tillage farm to now a more regenerative approach. What inspired you to make that shift in your own farm?
Yeah, so it definitely just observing what that practice was doing to the soil at that farm was it wasn't like that soil was dead or dying or anything, but it did feel like it was really extractive, that we weren't giving enough back to that soil so that it would be a long-term investment on the part of those farmers. Um, and also just the expense and time and carbon of running a tractor that many times over the same bed it just didn't feel right to me. And so that's why I came at this new farm with the idea of, you know, being as no-till as possible, which is to say, like, when it's possible. Tillage is a tool in the toolbox. And so we do it when we need to, but we try to avoid it. But sometimes it's just the thing that has to be done, especially when we're like starting a new plot, or
Mhm.
if we've got a lot of things, some really thick roots in the ground, like I grow broom corn, for example, and that stuff does not leave the soil. Like the roots stay in there like these crazy little mangrove roots. I mean, over the whole winter, sunflower stems will rot, but broomcorn will not rot. So we till it. And then we recently got a grant to buy a tractor and implements, which is amazing. We have an amazing county where the taxpayers actually support um farmers in various ways, but one of the ways is through grants through the county, and also by purchasing open space. So there's a lot of great things that our taxpayers do for us farmers, but we were able to get one of those grants, and so now we have a power harrow 4 foot wide on our tractor. We have an undercutter. Uh, uh, we have a flail mower. And then we also have a compost spreader, which is going to make our lives so much easier and make it a lot faster and better way for us to get compost out onto the beds. Um, so that said, we now have this sort of Swiss Army knife tractor that we can use to promote soil health, not just through tillage, but through being able to plant plant more cover crops, put more compost out, all kinds of ways that we're really able to support our soil health here on the farm and at a larger scale and with um, less effect on our bodies because we are, getting up there and have a baby now. And so it's been really, we have to save our bodies and save our time. So,
Absolutely. Well, that is really exciting. And in a little bit, I do want to ask you about motherhood. Congratulations,
yeah,
because I
thank
understand
you.
you just had a baby this year.
Yeah, she was born in August, late August. She was 2 months early, so she spent a little bit of time in the NICU. But it's really amazing. It's just people say having a kid is a miracle, and I don't think I've really ever understood the definition of miracle until I had a baby. I don't think you get it until it happens to you. So,
It's amazing. It's you grew a human. Like we watch as flower farmers, we're constantly growing things,
yeah,
but here you grow this true human being that really is a miracle. So,
absolutely.
and so your daughter is, we're recording this in January. So she's what, about 5
She's
months?
about 4 months old. Yeah.
4 months
She
old.
just, yeah, she just had her checkup at the end of December. But and then it's weird with preemies. So like you could either say that she's 4 months old or that she's 2 months old, So she seems to be developmentally like somewhere between those two
Okay.
places. But she's doing really, really well. She just was early. She didn't really have any problems. The problems we had were it was like my body and like my placenta and uterus stuff. So she's great. She just was in the NICU she had a little bit of oxygen and she had to learn how to eat and she had to grow, but other than that, she's really wonderful and she's been at home now with us for 3 months, which it's crazy because it feels like a really long time. But it hasn't been that long. It just feels like before she was born was a different life. So, you know, it's been really good and really challenging. I mean, it really puts some boundaries around what you're able to do as with work on the farm. So, thankfully we're in a slow season, but we're definitely looking at how are we going to get childcare so that we can actually do our jobs. Because I don't know. Have you seen this new book? It's Farm Raised Kids by Katie
No.
Kula. It's great. It's a really great new book by Katie Kula. She writes for Growing for Market and she does the Growing for Market podcast. Um, but yeah, so she just came out with this book and there's some really great, ideas and tips in there about how to integrate kids into your farm life. So I felt really lucky because that book came out this year and I was like, oh, well, perfect. So it was really fun to be reading about other people's experiences having their kids on the farm. But it's kind of like you think, sure, like we'll just bring the kid to work, she'll just hang out in a carrier or whatever. But it's just no, like they really need so much attention and it's great to have her on the farm. Like it provides so much stimulation and so much, cool things for her to do and look at and be around. Um, but, I can't like finish seeding a flat of snapdragons. So
Totally.
it's challenging. It's challenging.
Having her wrapped around you and covering her in dirt as you're like poking little
Exactly.
holes in a seed tray.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm really excited that you shared about the book Farm Raised Kids. I will have to check that out because I have a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say it gets easier, and it does in some ways, like they're no longer strapped to you. But
Hmm.
parenting, well, I should say farming while having children, it's not necessarily this glorious, like you see some of the like social media, the kids are playing in the flowers and running through the fields. That's
Hmm.
not the case for our family. The case for us is, Mom, I'm done digging in the dirt. Can I go home now?
Right. Right.
And so
No.
it creates a whole new level of challenges on the farm. And you had your baby in August, which I
Hmm.
imagine was prime season for you.
Yeah, it's been a really tough time. So I went to the hospital on August 1st because I was having some bleeding, and then by that afternoon I had been helicoptered to Denver
Oh my gosh.
because yeah, they wanted me to be in a, a higher level NICU in case she needed to be delivered. Um, so that was a crazy experience. I actually like had adrenaline shakes when I got off the helicopter, and it was crazy. It was really crazy. But oh, and what was also very interesting was that they billed insurance like $86,000 for the helicopter ride, which is like, wow, like our healthcare system. Anyway, but it
Yes.
was it was wild. And then, they just kept me under observation for that month. So, and then August 24th, I had the last time they were going to let me bleed. So I had another bleed, and they were like, you know what? It's time to get this baby out. She's, developed enough. She's had enough time that we know her outcome will be really good, but it's too unsafe for her to, stay inside. So I had a C-section, and then she was in the NICU for a month. So again, yeah, she was just on oxygen, and for she was on oxygen for a couple of weeks, but just, a nasal cannula, and then she was getting gavage feeding, so feeding through the nose, for most of the time she was there, and just learning how to eat. So doing breastfeeding, doing bottle feeding, to help her learn how to eat on her own. And then by the time she was able to do that, we could take her home. So, and then that was it was like having the baby all over again, because when you're in the NICU, you've got, a team of 12 nurses around the clock helping you take care of this baby. And then you're at home and you're like, oh no, now I can't see what her heart rate is all the time, or her temperature, or, they're not going to weigh her every day, So, um, and then also, of course, I'm awake all the time, where before I had been going, it was great actually, because I was able to recover from my C-section at home, going to sleep, for most of the night other than pumping. And but yeah, so that was another adjustment, bringing her home. And with kids, it's every day seems really different, especially at this age. I think every kind of week it's something new that's happening, and schedules are changing. And so just like with farming, it's adaptability, flexibility, just like allowing plans to shift and change. And that's hard for me. I'm a very like, I don't know, I'm a very analytical person. I really like to have a plan. I really like to, I plan out the whole season week by week, and what we're going to seed and all of that, and where it's going to go. And most of the time we stick to the seeding schedule, but kind of like everything else sort of goes out the window at some point. It's still a good exercise, I think, to do the planning, but
Totally.
but it often just is that, a plan that isn't executed. But yeah, it's been great to be a farmer and to learn that flexibility in myself, and now to be a parent and to learn even further deeper flexibility, like emotionally and with my partner. And yeah, so it's been a really cool, really, I don't know, I feel like everything has sort of like prepared me now to be a mom and a farmer. And been able to learn so much, really good life lessons throughout everything, really.
I love that because my story is opposite of yours. But I'm a planner also. I'm very much a
Mm,
planner. So when my daughter came, everything was very planned and regimented. And then I became a flower farmer. after the fact. And now I've learned to let things go and be a little bit more flexible and resilient.
Mm-hmm.
But I had never thought about that I bet farmers who are farmers prior to having kids are way better parents than someone like me who was so regimented and didn't have that adaptability built into me, because farming really does teach us to be resilient and adaptable and flexible. I mean, there's so much out of our control. Like, as a control freak, I've had to release so much over the last 6 years.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. That's a great word for it, is release. And that's how farming and motherhood have been for me, where there's just like a lot of surrender. There's just a
Yes,
lot of surrender. And then counting on yourself to just really do your best and do the most important things with the time that you have. Um, which is that's the whole point of living, as far as I can tell, is like, let's find what's the most important thing to give our attention to, and we'll do that. And the other things are just going to have to slide.
that's such great wisdom. So, along that same path, now that you're a mother and a flower farmer, how is your business going to change
Mm.
in the coming year?
So yeah, so the business, amazingly, my husband has been able to farm full time with me for the past 2 seasons after he left his job. At He was doing influencer marketing for this company that does that, and he does graphic design and identities for new companies as well. Um, but he has been able to join me, and so that means that we are both really committed to the business, and having that other partner with you who's not an employee but who's an owner, it's just been game changing for us, because he's got all of these strengths that I don't have, and vice versa. And so by having these two really committed owners, we with different strengths, we have really been able to cover a lot more bases of our farm. Um, and really kind of get things down and under our belts, and sort of going, like the ball is just rolling. So that has been absolutely incredible. And then the rest of everything, we are expanding a little bit this year with our footprint on the farm. So, especially having the tractor, we're able to open up more land more easily. And I'm looking into doing more sort of extensive cropping, like more sunflowers. We're doing more ornamental pumpkins. We're doing more grasses and things that, because some of the land that we're farming on is really pretty weedy. So, it's hard to do things that require a lot of care. And at the same time, we're really concentrating on varieties that are uh, really profitable and productive for us. So we still want to keep a mix of really unique things, because, of course, that's what sets us apart as local flower farmers. So, the things that florists can't get, like I grow this thing called Lorenziana blanket flower, and it's a double blanket flower. It's really unique. People really like it. Another thing I grow is a Zulu Prince daisy that, you're just not going to get that at the wholesaler. Cosmos, dahlias, things like that that the florists really, really appreciate. So concentrating on those things that we are good at and that our florists appreciate from us, as opposed to getting them from the wholesale house. Um, that has been really important, and kind of that's where we're at. But we're doing, let's see, this year we grossed, or 2024 we grossed $225,000, and that's on our acre and a quarter, plus probably another half acre in the other fields. So our main field is about an acre and a quarter with 3 high tunnels. um, well, caterpillar tunnels. um, and I feel really good about that. Our goal is, 300,000 for this year, but we're able to support ourselves. And then last year it was one full-time employee and one part-time employee. This year we'll have at least 2 full-time employees. We're in the process of hiring right now, which is a lot of fun. It's really cool to meet all these people that are interested in flowers. Um, And then, yeah, maybe a part-time person this year as well. So like it feels like we're in this growth stage. And having a kid really means that we have to dial in all of those systems that are gonna allow our employees to do their best work. So that might be writing our SOPs, updating our employee handbook, really getting those training sessions down
Mhm.
pat of like what is it that this person really needs to know and do, and how does that need to be done so that it's good, you know? And so we're actually starting with two new employees this year. So, that's a whole aspect of my job that I really enjoy, which is the teaching and training people. I really love that. That's why we do a lot of on-farm workshops and things here. But the training the employees is it's going to be a blank slate this year, so I'm excited about it. I'm really excited to kind of get some more systems in place that are going to help people like do their best work and keep us all really like a well-oiled machine. And so I feel good about where we're at with that as far as like we have a lot of good SOPs and um I feel like I'm able to express my expectations and able to express the quality and the standards for the product. So that feels really good. And yeah, yeah, like I feel great about where our business is right now. We're also because we have a child, we're definitely pulling back from some of our outlets. So we're not going to go to farmers market this year. We are only doing weddings where people come and pick up their arrangements from us. We're not going and doing any installations or anything like that. No deliveries, and that's also that we can just stay on the farm as much as possible. And so that's where like our on-farm workshops really come in. Is on the Saturday, I'm able to make almost as much money doing an on-farm workshop as I am going to farmers market, but there's just like a lot less prep and time and everything
That's
associated with it.
amazing.
And I really love it. It's really fun for me. I love going to market too. I really appreciate, hearing from people, oh, I've never seen that before in my life. That is so cool. These are the most beautiful flowers I've ever seen. Like, people really love it. It feels really
Mhm.
good to get that feedback at market. So it'll be sad for us. And my husband really enjoys market too, so he'll be sad to not go. But maybe we'll do a Mother's Day guest spot or something like that. So
I love that you have become a mother, and I keep saying this word and that are doing both. Like you can be a mother and a flower farmer and you're expanding your business this year. Like that
yeah.
is so amazing. And from what I'm gathering from what you're saying, I think you're able to do a lot of this because you have these systems in place.
Hmm.
Can we talk a little bit about those systems? Because like for me, and I think a lot of the listeners out there, it's been just me on my farm. And a lot
Yeah.
of my listeners know that we went from leasing land to now we have a 20-acre field, which we're not farming 20 acres. We're
Yeah.
starting small again. But to scale up, I'm going to need a team. How did you
Hmm.
develop systems for your farm so that it
Hmm.
was not just you? Because obviously, with you being gone in August and September, 2 prime months for a flower farmer, and your
Yeah.
farm still didn't just carry on, but it thrived last year. How did you
Hmm.
get those systems in place so you could do that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just, yeah, it's really been the sort of diversity of my experience on all these different, three different farms, and then working for different people, having different goals for my uh, my work and on these different farms. Um, I think that what has been most important for me is just defining the job and defining what needs to be done. And even though it seems silly to take the time to write, and when I say SOP, I mean standard operating procedure. So we're writing down, how do we plant a flat of snapdragons, right? So here's the soil mix that we use. We use this and then we add this to it and we mix it in this proportion and we add a little bit of water and then we take this tray and we put it on the bench. We fill it with soil, we tap it a couple of times so there's not as much air. It's like this really detailed um, system or document, right, that we use to say this is how this should be done. Now, that always has flexibility built into it because different people do different things in a different way, whether that's because their body, it feels more comfortable for their body in that other way, or it's more convenient. For me, as long as the quality is there and it's getting done, that's fine. It seems silly to write down these exact steps sometimes, especially if you're doing it just on your own. It's just for you, but it can be really clarifying. It can be really, um, yeah, just focuses you on what's important about that task and why we're doing the thing the way we're doing it. And that's really an important thing to have in your back pocket. So even if it's just for yourself, to write down those processes, I think is a really good exercise. It really helps you clarify why you're doing it that way. And then once you're ready to start working with other people, and I would say, like, for most people, if you're doing this as a business, I would say hire people faster than you think. Like, because the more people, or the sooner you start working with people, the sooner you're going to be able to get in the groove of managing people and really figure out what kind of manager you are and be able to get again those systems in place to help people because you'll be working out the kinks with them. And so I think even having, let's say you're managing a farm on your own and you're doing most of the on farm work, great. But maybe you hire somebody to help you with your emails and your social media or something like that. Especially if it's something that like you don't really enjoy, like if you want to be out in the field and stuff, like hire somebody to help you with your social media. It can be like 5 hours a week, and that way you're getting a little bit of practice, like working with somebody else, defining your goals on the farm and communicating those goals to somebody else. So yeah, I would say for me, the systems building sort of started with record keeping. I really wanted to know how much I was producing on the farm. And so that meant like, okay, I've developed this record keeping sheet, a harvest sheet where I go out and I say, okay, in this bed, we're harvesting this plant. And today we're writing down, okay, I harvested 5 bunches of, yellow cosmos today. And that way, when I take that sheet and I go and I put it into the computer, actually, I work with my mom. My mom is my executive assistant, is what we call her when we're being
I love it.
fancy. So she comes in and she'll call me on the phone and go through my emails with me while I'm out in the field harvesting. And I'll say, I'll basically do like a thumbs up, thumbs down, or whatever on somebody's question, or somebody has a a bride has a request for a wedding and say thumbs up, thumbs down, and then she goes through the process of um, getting them onboarded and stuff. But she also does the data entry, so I get all of this record, all of these records of my harvest. And that's where it started for me because I was like, oh, I really want this data. I really want to know what we're producing and what's the best thing for us to grow, what's the most productive thing. And of course, there's so many variables that it's hard to tell just from that data, but you can get a good sense of what's happening through the season if you're keeping records of what you're doing. So that's where it started for me was like, okay, we're going to keep records and this is how we're going to do it. Right. And then from there, it's sort of like, okay, now there's all of these other tasks and things that I would really like to be done in a certain way, or that at least here's a really good guideline for how to do this task in an efficient way so that we're all making the best of our time. And for me, I just really enjoy that kind of work. So sitting down and saying, this is the way that we transplant, right? So we get the plants out, they get hardened off. We do a root soak in fish emulsion, and then we use this rake thing to lay out the lines, and then for this plant, it goes in at 6 by 6 spacing, and this is how we measure that. And we do that on a triangle spacing. And, we're going to make sure that it's covered, up to that the plug soil is covered. And then we're going to lay back the drip line on and we're going to do some hand watering. And, so that if I am gone, which I was, people can see exactly what to do. Um, and I'm not, and it's a really interesting thing because like you want to be essential to your operation, but it's also essential that you are not essential to your operation. Like
Totally.
if you need to like just spread out that knowledge, you really need to stop hoarding it. That was, at least for me, this is what I said to myself. Like, I'll stop hoarding all of this knowledge that I have, and I really have to give capacity to the folks around me who are helping me, right? And that's actually been really empowering and really a good thing that's happened on our farm. We I just really enjoy seeing my employees grow and learn and come up with their own ideas for how to do things differently or do things faster. Because when you can give people capacity and give them, responsibility and trust, they really bloom. They really just come into their own. So, um, as much as like the SOPs feel like this really dry thing, it actually gives the people you're working with a little bit more creativity because it's like, here's the guidelines. And then within that, do it the way that it's best, right? And yeah, so that's been really fun. So setting up the SOPs, making the seating schedule at the beginning of the year, because that way it's like, okay, this week here's what the seating schedule says to do. We just do that. We just do it.
Uh,
And that has kept our farm going. And actually, my husband, he said we had an amazing September. Like we had a really, really good September in terms of sales and harvest. It was really good. Um, and he said, it wasn't me. I said, oh, it's because I wasn't there. It's because I was not there and you guys were able to just be awesome without me. He's like, no, no, no. It's because you did so much planning in advance. So you did so much planning. You really gave people capacity to do their jobs without you. And that is resilience, right? So when you're able to weather a really difficult time and still come out ahead, that's resilience. And so the reason that that happened is that I had a seeding schedule plan. Everybody knew where things were going to go and what was going to be planted and how they were going to be harvested. I had, you know, with experience, you just get that rhythm of, okay, here's this focal flower coming into season, and then here's the next one coming into season, and here's the next one, and here's the succession. And like, now I used to do one succession of zinnias, but that's not enough anymore because like the first one will sort of, get gross after a while, but the second one will go all the way to frost. So, we've learned that over time. So knowing that, great, we're going to seed that second succession of zinnias at this time. That means it gets planted at this time. And then we have zinnias all the way to frost. And so that's kind of how it worked out, how it has worked out for me. And to just be able to trust people and give them that work and that freedom to do the work in the way that's best for them and it's best for the farm. So, yeah, it's a long process, I guess I would say, with those systems, and it's definitely um, unique to everybody's operation. But as much as you can do, as much as you can sit down and sort of define those processes, it's really great. And then of course we have all that flexibility built into it too. So being able to say, yeah, that was the plan, but that's not going to work anymore. But as much as possible, sticking to that seating schedule really helps us. So.
I think that's such great wisdom. And as I think about it, as you were talking, even being a solo farmer by myself, even when I was growing on a quarter of an acre, there was
Mhm.
a summer where, like, one of the things that we've really been focusing on for planning the future is that our daughter is getting older and we don't take summer vacations because
Mm.
it's harvest time. And a couple years ago, my daughter and we went down to California to visit family. I believe it was for my niece's first birthday. And
Mhm.
we were only going for like 3 days. So 2 nights, 3 days. And I had to get someone to water the plants because even though I had drip lines to everything, it was like that random heat wave where we were going to get up to 118 degrees. but
Oh,
I had no like plans. I'm like trying to write on Apple Notes of what to do. And I come back and things are dead. And I can't really
yeah.
be angry because I didn't have a great system to tell someone.
Hmm.
And it's like you're chained to your farm almost if no
Yes.
one can do what you do. And it's not
Yes.
like anything we do is that hard or rocket science.
Hmm.
So I love this idea of, regardless of what size, just taking the time to create these operating procedures so someone can step in. What if you break your arm? Or
Yeah.
I hammered my hand 2 summers ago putting down landscape fabric, and
Yeah.
my hand hurt so bad that I couldn't use my left. Thankfully, it was my left hand. But you
Yeah.
never know when something's going to happen. And especially if you're working by yourself, it's maybe even
Even
more
more important
important.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
So thank you for sharing that wisdom. I want to
Absolutely.
go back if we can. You mentioned that the land that you're growing on is shared space. Did you find this land or did you come upon this collectively? How did this collective come to be?
Yeah, thank you. I love talking about this. So thanks for that question. Yeah. So we were looking for land. We thought we were going to buy land, and then um, we just it's so expensive here. We just couldn't find anything that was reasonable. Like the best thing we found was 10 acres with maybe water rights and a mobile home on it. And it was just like, it was gross. So we came across this property through I'm part of the Flatirons Farmers Coalition, which is a local group of farmers. And so I came across this because the land that we're on is owned by another farmer, and they do animal agriculture at another farm about 5 miles away. But they had this property, they had bought it. It was a cattle feedlot before they bought it. They bought it, they were cleaning it up. I mean, they did a lot to it. Like the greenhouse where we are was a cattle barn, and it was like, I don't know, 3 feet deep in manure, but they got it
Wow.
all out. Yeah, they put like a greenhouse, roof on it and then cemented in the floor on the one side. And so there's been just like a lot done to it. We came in, I saw that they were looking for people to lease it. And I came and did a tour of the property. I was like, wow, like this is really great. The irrigation system, the greenhouse, it's really got everything that you need to start a farm. Um, but it was, it's $5,000 a month to lease this place.
Oh.
And that was just not going to be possible for us. So actually through mutual friends and just knowing people in the farming community, we got hooked up with Cody and Melissa Speedwell Farm and Gardens, and they had put together an amazing proposal for leasing this land. And they had already sort of done a lot of the legwork of bringing together some people who were going to allow us to be able to afford it and also take care of the land in the way that the owners wanted us to. So I said, hey, buddies, I have a different product than you. I'm not a vegetable grower, I'm a flower grower. I really think that our operations could complement each other. And so they very graciously allowed me to kind of tack my proposal onto theirs. But I think that as a group, we became a really strong candidate for this property. And then, we were able to get that proposal approved by the owners. And yeah, so we took possession in January of 2021. So this will be our fifth. That's so crazy. It'll be our fifth season on this farm. Um, and yeah, it's fantastic. So the way that we structured it, I really like to talk about this because a lot of people are interested in how we're doing it. So we're two completely separate operations. We're not, farming collaboratively or anything.
Mhm.
We're working together to take care of the land. And so they have about an acre and a half that they're growing on. I have my main field of an acre and a quarter, and then we all collectively work on the rest of the land, and we divide that up between, let's say, we're not going to use all of it, so we'll do cover crop on this part, or they're going to grow like a big field of winter squash, and I'm going to do dahlias out here, and I'm going to do sunflowers out here, right? Um, so have frequent meetings. We sit down and we talk about how we're going to use the land and so on. So the way we actually set it up was that we created a new LLC, which is the Treehouse Farm Collective. So that LLC holds the lease with our landowners. And then the LLC subleases to our individual businesses. So we sublease to Artemis Flower Farm, to me and Nelson for the house, to Speedwell Farm and Garden, to the tool library, and to the vermicomposting operation, Vertiterra. And so the the collective, the Treehouse Farm Collective, is kind of just a bank account, where we collect rent and then give it to our landlords. But it does allows us to have a lot of flexibility in paying for utilities and buying things collectively like soil or fertilizer or something. So it's just, yeah, it's been really wonderful. And then to be farming with other people who are doing this as a business, they actually just had their baby 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
And yeah, so it's really weird. There's something in the water in our community. Like everybody is having babies right now. So, but it's just going to be amazing to be growing our families together and be farming this land together because you're so much less isolated.
Mhm.
You have all of these other brains at your disposal. You can look over and you can see, oh man, what are they doing? What is that? What's that tool? What are they using, to make their lettuces so green and beautiful? What are they, what is that tilther? Like I hadn't seen a tilther before and they were using that. I was like, oh, that's nifty. And, we used it in our tunnels a little bit. We're able to use this tractor that we got collaboratively and collectively on the farm. We're able to share tools, share resources, and of course, share the burden of the rent and the utilities and all that. So, but there's just so many benefits to farming together, especially when you're doing it with people who are growing something different than you and have just different um, goals, different experiences, different expertise. So, yeah, that's the best thing. It's the best part of, I think, our business, and definitely the thing that makes our business possible. So, in the way that we're running it, like I could run this business on my own on a different piece of land. But I know that by doing this collaboratively and collectively, we have been able to grow our business much faster and much more sustainably than we would have otherwise, right? Because like we're able to afford this property that has the infrastructure that we need already. And then because we're sharing costs and sharing tools, we're able to purchase things that like it costs half as much, it
Yeah.
costs half as much for me to buy like an implement for the BCS, or it costs half as much for me to get this big bag of fertilizer that like maybe I would use over the course of 2 seasons or something, but now we can get it and we're sharing the cost of the shipping. There's just really, it's just awesome. I really appreciate what we've been able to build together. And then, of course, like the interpersonal stuff is fantastic too. So, like being able to um, have difficult conversations sometimes or bring up things that, it's like, hey, like I really need this part of the greenhouse for this year. Does that feel fair? How can we make it feel fair? How can we do this in a way so the responsibilities of like doing the taxes for that LLC or doing the bookkeeping for it, and making sure that the rent gets paid and gets collected and all of that. So we share these responsibilities too. Um, it's great. That's really all I have to say about it.
It's such a unique way of farming. And I'm sure there's so many people listening who have light bulbs going off thinking, oh, what a great way that would be, especially if someone's trying to get started and doesn't have land. I am curious though, do you live on the land?
I do, yeah. So me and Nelson, we live here together. Cody and Melissa, they live 10 minutes away in North Boulder, and they have a really good housing situation. So it was a difficult decision when we first got the property of who was going to live in the house. But because of their living situation, it was actually more cost effective for them to stay where they were and for us to
Gotcha.
live on the farm. So, um, there's a lot of things with housing. Like we would love to be able to have some employee housing here. We would love to all be able to live on the land, of course. And there's just a lot of restrictions because our property also has a conservation easement. So we're only allowed to have like one single family home. It can be 4,000 square feet, but it's a single family home. So, but yeah, that was a hard decision, but it's worked out well, I think, for everybody. And they're doing great. And I think we're all pretty happy with that. So
That's awesome. How big is the property?
in total, it's 17 acres. So it's not enormous, but we have really good water rights, which is essential here in the West. So we have 18 shares of the ditch that runs kind of through the property, and then we're able to take our shares out of that into our retention pond, and then that goes through our irrigation system with our big pump and our underground PVC up into our lay flat and our drip irrigation lines. So yeah, it's 17 acres. Probably six and a half of those are productive land. The rest of it, there's, the greenhouse, the barn. There's this place that we call the terraces. It's kind of just like, blah. We have pigs on it right now, which are really fun. So there's another farmer who's, they're his pigs, but they're doing us a big service by kind of eating up a bunch of the weeds and digging up
Oh,
some of the
amazing.
land there. So they're being very useful. And then, yeah, just where the house is and some other sort of, oh, and then our big metal barn where the tool library is. So yeah, it's interesting. It's a really diverse property, and there's so many people coming in and out and doing things all the time on the property. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, it's also a lot of work to take care of, a lot of the areas on the farm that are sort of marginal. But we've come up with some pretty good, just being plugged into a bigger community of people who are, animal farmers or who have, other kinds of machinery like mowers and folks that do snow removal. I mean, it's just, it's good to have this like big group of people on the farm and have so much activity. So.
And you said there's a conservation easement on the property?
Yeah, so that means so uh the landlords purchased the property from the city of Boulder. Um and or no, sorry, they didn't purchase it from the city of Boulder, but when they purchased it, they got like a better price on it because they did a conservation easement through the city of Boulder. And so the city wrote a conservation easement that says this is meant to be an agricultural property, and here are all the things that you can't do. Like you can't have a junkyard, you can't have a dirt bike, like like track or whatever. You
Uh-huh.
can't have there's like a bunch of things that you can't do. Um and that's intended to keep it an agricultural property. On all three sides of us, there is County of Boulder open space actually as well, which is cared for by a rancher. So he does flood irrigation and runs his cows on all three sides of us. And actually, this property used to be part of his land, the feedlot operation here. So there's a lot of history actually here. That most of the people that come to the farm are like, oh, I know this place. Like this is where the hemp was, or this is where that feedlot was, or I remember working here doing. I was building the greenhouse or something. So it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, the conservation easement basically says don't do stupid stuff, just keep it a farm.
Gotcha.
But yeah,
So it's not like a wetland easement or an animal easement or
it's
anything
not.
like that.
It's really just that they don't want you doing commercial stuff, and they don't want you to disturb the land in ways that would not make it usable agriculturally. So yeah.
Gotcha. Here in Oregon, land like mine is called EFU, which is exclusive farm use. And we
Oh
have
yeah.
very, very strict regulations of what you can and cannot do. You can't have a campground because my husband was like, oh, we could put some hip camps and have this
Yep.
like agritourism, but agritourism is not permitted. Um, so it's interesting having to like learn the lay of the land and what you can and cannot do.
I
Um,
know. Yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, I think our easement is okay, but there's a lot of things about those legal agreements where it's like you're really making it hard for us to like have a viable, agricultural business.
totally.
So there were some things in our easement about having an on-farm store, and we eventually learned that the way they were defining on-farm store meant that we could still have an on-farm store, but it was like, there was a lot of legalese and trying to figure that out. And um, yeah, it can be those easements because they're developed by people who aren't farmers, they tend to
Hmm.
be maybe not as farmer friendly as they should be. Um, but yeah, the hip camp thing is the same here. They're like, no temporary, camping or anything like that. We can have temporary worker housing, which is really great. So if we wanted to put like an RV or a tiny home on the property that's for workers to live in, we could do that, but it has to be mobile. So yeah, lots of legal stuff to think about too. But thankfully we have some good help with our landlords have like a good lawyer that helps us out. So
Oh, that's great. Because yeah,
yeah.
it's confusing. I had no idea because I was previously growing on residential land, and so now it's this whole new ballpark of learning what you can and cannot do with
Exactly.
farmland. Especially as a flower farmer, I'm finding there's a lot of gray areas
Yes.
because we're not an edible crop. They're like, well, does that really even fall under? And I'm like, yes, we feed the
Oh, I
souls.
know. No, and that's very interesting because there's so many like funding opportunities out there too that are really focused on food, which is great and there should be programs for that, but a lot of the time it's like well, your grant is focused on, let's say, soil health. And I'm
Yes.
doing all of those same things that a vegetable grower is doing for soil health. And that's why, like, the grant that we got through our county is focused on soil health. And so I was able to say, yes, I am doing all of these practices for the soil that are the same that a vegetable or a, commodity crop grower would be doing. Right. And so, yeah, that's been and I always, whenever there's a grant out there and they're like, only food people can apply, I'm like, you should really consider like a flour and fiber, sort of grant as well. Or this program
Yes.
should also be open to people who aren't necessarily growing food. As important as food is, um, I think that beauty is really, really, really important too. Um, I don't know if you know this guy. His name is David White, but he's a poet who wrote the book that I'm thinking of is called Consolations, and he goes through and has a different prose poem sort of for each of these words. And one of the ones that he does is beauty, and it's like this koan. It says, "Beauty, um, beauty is the harvest of presence,"
Ooh.
and I just adore that because that is how I kind of, I don't know, that's like what makes me keep doing flowers and keep thinking about beauty, right? Is that when we are thinking about beauty, we are observing something with our senses and our bodies, and we are
Mhm.
really fully present in the moment, right? We're saying, oh my God, look at this, the creation. Look at this absolutely miraculous thing that has appeared on the earth for us to observe and enjoy, right? And so when we're able to see something as beautiful, it means that we're really there. Like we're really here experiencing our lives right now and experiencing like the natural world in this really profound and important way. Um, so you can kind of have this corollary to that, which is that presence is the harvest of beauty, right? To be present, we can use beauty to be more present in our daily lives. And so I feel like as a flower farmer, I'm really able to offer people that really important thing, which is let me I'm captivated by this flower. Um, by this beautiful thing. Like I'm captivated by it. I am brought into the present moment by it. I'm paying attention. I'm like giving my attention to this right now in front of me
Mhm.
here, and there's just like nothing better than that. There's just nothing better than it. And so I just really adore David White. So that's the first line of that piece of work that he wrote about beauty, but the rest of it is just as profound. I really encourage anybody who's interested in beauty in whatever way, whether you're an artist or a flower grower. It's just a fantastic piece of writing.
I just wrote that down. I'm going to check that out. That is,
Definitely.
I want to say that's so beautiful, even though you just said the word beauty. But I mean, I love that so much because I think about that all the time when I'm out in the farm. It's like, yes, flowers exist for pollination, but what's their purpose? Their purpose is to
Mm-hmm.
bring beauty to this world. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure God or the universe, whatever you believe, could have created another way for pollinators
Right.
to pollinate. But instead, we have this beautiful thing that
Yeah.
just brings joy to our lives.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's for me, and I think so many other people as flower farmers, it fills our souls in a way that nothing else really can. And it's that beauty, like that
Yeah.
one word right there is just
Yeah.
such a powerful thing. So thank you for sharing that. I have so many other
Totally.
questions for you, but we've been talking for so long already that I feel like we probably should wrap this up and maybe leave the door
Totally.
open for
Yeah.
a second conversation if you have some free time in your new
I would be
motherhood.
happy to. Or, I mean, if you have like maybe I can do like one word answers to some things.
Oh,
If you
some
have a
snap
rapid
fire.
fire, like we can do like a, lightning round.
Well, I was really wanting to talk to you about soil health.
Yeah,
So maybe we could end it with just a few tips that you have for people
sure.
about why soil health matters as a flower farmer.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously where, you know, beauty that we're talking about comes from the soil. It comes from the the web of life that is in your soil. So we have to think about soil as a living entity. It is profoundly diverse in the amount and number and the kinds of species that are the diversity of species that are there. I mean, a teaspoon of soil has something like 1 billion organisms in it. It's crazy. It's crazy. And so I really believe that our job as farmers of any kind is to steward that life in the soil because when you have a soil that is overly disturbed, it means that the creatures there don't have a home anymore. And all of the services that they're doing for your plants, they can't do them, anymore. And so I really think that as much as we're providing a home for plants on our farms, really we're providing a home for the microorganisms in the soil, as well as, macroorganisms throughout the farm, whether that's the birds that are coming to eat the worms that are, feeding on the bacteria in the soil, that sort of chain of life, and or the snakes that are like eating the bunnies or the voles or whatever, or the owls who come and eat the voles. There's just like a huge chain of life that's completely dependent on the soil and its ability to store the energy from the sun. And that's another way that flower farming and farming in general is really beautiful because we see how connected we are to not only microorganisms but huge, the universe, the solar system, the giant ball of gas that is the sun. Like, you know, there's there's a big chain that's connecting us in both directions, macro and micro. So I really think that, um, and it's important in a spiritual way too for us to conserve the soil. As far as tips for doing that, it's just like the five principles of soil health are what I always go back to. So it's disturb as little as possible, keep a living root in the ground, keep the soil covered. Diversity, diversity, diversity. So not just planting dahlias, through the whole field all the time every year, but really rotating things and rotating within families. And then animal integration as much as possible. I mean, and animals are just a lot of fun. So like even if you're throwing your 10 chickens out there at the end of the season, that totally counts, or and we human beings are animals as well. So I consider when I'm out there in the field that's animal integration. If you're able to do things like have some pigs like we have coming through our field, or maybe it's sheep, or, some kind of low impact animal, like those 5 principles of soil health, like I just really try to stick to those. It's really helpful to me, and especially keeping a living root in the ground. So when I'm not able to keep a living root in the ground through cover cropping or cash cropping, then I'll put out mulch so that the soil is covered, whether that's leaves or maybe it's wood chips, or compost as a mulch, something like that. Um, and then, disturbing as little as possible. So we do have to disturb the soil to plant and to weed and to harvest and all of those things, right? But allowing those microorganisms and everybody to have their homes as long as possible and, in place, that's our goal. And then the diversity and yeah, the animal integration. So those are just those are the classic ones and they work really well. So, but yeah, you know, we're not out there trying to make the field look completely pristine and amazing all the time. Like it's just not going to. That's something that I've learned as well with no-till and with, soil health practices, is that the farm looks a little bit messier than maybe you would like, and maybe than your social media feed looks. But I think that means you're doing something right, because you have diversity, and you have life. And we're not just like, we only have the plants that we've planted, right? We're opening things up. We're allowing the farm to be a home for a lot of different animals, plants, creatures, people. Um, and yeah, that's really important.
Thank you, Helen. Wow,
Yeah.
you are a wealth of knowledge on so much with farming and life and even motherhood. Even though you're a new
Oh, just
mama,
new baby, new baby
you
mama.
already have you have so much wisdom already. Your daughter is a lucky little girl.
Oh, thank you.
And so lucky to be able to grow up on such an amazing farm with a community surrounding her. I think that's one of the hardest things as a farmer, sometimes, especially when you're doing it alone. And part of why I created this podcast is for the community, because it can be really lonely if you're doing it by yourself. And so my hope is
Right.
that by telling these stories, by people hearing your story, people just feel more connected, because we can make a bigger difference when we do this together. So I really appreciate you being here today. Before we say goodbye, I do have a couple quick questions.
Go for it.
First is, for those that want to know more about you, where can they find you and Artemis Farm?
Yeah. So our website is artemisflowerfarm.com. And I know that's a difficult name. So that's Artemis flowerfarm.com. She's the Greek goddess of the wilderness, actually.
Oh, I love
And
that.
so, yeah, she's pretty awesome, Artemis. I have a whole blog about why we picked that name and stuff. But artemisflowerfarm.com. We're also Artemis Flower Farm on Instagram. And our farm is, yeah, between Boulder and Longmont here in Colorado. We have an on-farm store, and we do a lot of on-farm workshops, floral design and flower gardening. So love to welcome people here all the time for those events. And yeah, I think I don't know. I really want to do like a fall farm fest on our farm and do
Ooh.
like, pumpkins. And my dream is to have all of our neighbors bring lots and lots of leaves, because most people take them to the landfill. But what I'd really like to do is create a giant pile of leaves and then have a diving board where you can dive off
Oh
of
my
it
gosh.
into the pile of leaves. That's the
That
plan.
sounds
And then
amazing.
and pumpkins and sunflowers. But anyway, that's in the works for another season probably. But yeah, those are the ways you can get in touch with me.
Well, you should do that next year around the same time as the Boulder Marathon.
Ooh, yeah. Are you gonna do that?
It's on our bucket list. So
Cool.
I would run a
Very
half
cool.
marathon, not a full. But
Right.
I better start training now because I'm totally out of shape.
Tell me about it. I'm out of shape for sure.
Well, you've
But
got a better excuse than me. You just had a baby.
yeah,
Okay.
that would be fun.
My final question. What would you like to leave our listeners with today?
Thinking about the conversation that we just had, I would really like for people to know that this is hard. This is a really hard thing to do, no matter how you're doing it. And it's really worth it. It is worth it.
Mhm.
It's worth it every day. And just to when you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling like it's not working, I would really encourage you to just do what we just talked about, which is be present and take a look at everything that you have built and take a look at the tiniest little thing on your farm, in your hand, in your soil, because I guarantee you will find inspiration in that, even when you're feeling your worst and even when things are really, really hard. And just keep doing it because it's really important that we have this beauty in the world. And I'm just really proud to be part of a big community like this of people that care about care about beauty and care about taking care of the earth that we live on. So
Well, we are so blessed to have you as part of this flower community. And I know you're also super involved with the ASCFG. I think I got the
you
acronyms
did
right
it.
that
You
time.
did it.
I'm also a member. But thank you so much for your contributions to the
Oh
floral
yeah.
community. It's so appreciated. And you are such an inspiring leader in this space. So thank you and enjoy this
What,
winter with
Jen?
your little one. And we would love to keep the door open to have you back on the podcast again.
Absolutely. Yeah, please do. I'm excited to hear how this turns out and open to questions. And so be in touch.
Thanks so much, Helen. Have a wonderful day.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, flower friends, for joining us on another episode of The Backyard Bouquet. I hope you've enjoyed the inspiring stories and valuable gardening insights we've shared today. Whether you're cultivating your own backyard blooms or supporting your local flower farmer, you're contributing to the local flower movement, and we're so happy to have you growing with us. If you'd like to stay connected and continue this blossoming journey with local flowers, don't forget to subscribe to the Backyard Bouquet podcast. I'd be so grateful if you would take a moment to leave us a review of this episode. And finally, please share this episode with your garden friends. Until next time, keep growing, keep blooming, and remember that every bouquet starts right here in the backyard.